Alright, today we're going to learn how to mix a Flysky TH9X remote. There's a couple tricks to it, but we'll just try to go through things in order. First off, what you should know is if looking over at this plane, this is the type of plane that I'm trying to program. It has your two ailerons on each side, and then it has two flaps, and then in the back it has an elevator that actually is separated, so it has two servos and then a rudder. So going through this, I decided on a couple different things. First, I wanted the flaps to move together, and I didn't want to have to worry about mixing them. So what I actually did is I connected this servo and this servo using a Y harness, and that just plugs in, so whatever channel, it's going to control both of them. I ran into a problem where they were moving in opposite directions, and so what I actually had to do is get a switching Y harness. You can get those online or at a hobby store. Anyway, going into how I hooked up the plane, here's a quick little list. These are all the channels on the receiver, and for channel 1 I hooked in an aileron. For channel 2 I did the first elevator. Channel 3 I did the throttle. Channel 4 I did the rudder. Channel 5 I did flaps. Channel 6 I did the second elevator. Channel 7 I did the second aileron. Now most people, what they have is they have an ESC that includes a BSC or a BEC, and so that will be included in channel 3 with your throttle, but I actually have a separate BEC. My ESC doesn't have a BEC, and so I connected a BEC to my battery channel of the receiver, and my BEC actually has two outputs, so I connected one to the battery and one to the bind. And that will make a little bit more sense later on when we go through this. So first thing we want to do is turn on the remote, get that going, and then I'm going to come and turn on the plane and hook in all the channels that need to be hooked in. Alright. So the plane is on right now. Let me just move things around so my servos stop acting up. Okay, well that will work for now. So going into this, right now I have it set up on my one of my profiles. But what we want to do is, first thing is we want to set up a new profile for the remote. So we're going to hit the menu button. Let me move this so you can see that a little bit better. Okay, so we're going to hold the menu button, and there's two different things you can do. There's system settings and functional settings. To set up a new profile, you want to go into system settings and click menu, and then you want to go into mode select, so click menu. And then you have these different profiles that you can go through. I'm going to select a profile that hasn't been used yet, and notice the helicopter. So we're going to have to change that in a second. And we're going to disconnect that. Okay, so we're going to go into type select, and we're going to change that to a plane, and we're going to do the acroplane. Alright, there we go. So we have the type, and now we're going to go to mode name. And this is just, we're going to rename this real quick so we can tell it apart. To scroll through the top, you use the up and down on the left keypad. And then to actually select the different letters, you're going to go left and right. So let's just do something generic like O. And then what you want to do is when you want to select a letter, you hold the menu until it selects it. Now we're just going to go over and do this. So we can go over, we're going to clear that, go over, clear that, and just continue throughout the rest of them. Okay, so when you're done and you have your name, you instead of holding menu, you just click menu. Now we can go to mode select again, and our plane O now shows up. So we're going to select O, and then if you go into Modulat, you just want to keep that at ppm. And if you go to stick set, most of the time you want to do mode 2. What this does is it just changes your input channels. And so I have it set up on mine where I have the throttle at 3, and you can just look at these. These are compared to your joysticks, and so that's how I set mine up. And just click mode. Okay, so now the system settings are done. You want to hit exit, exit, and now you can see when your remote goes back to the bottom, you have our O profile. Let me make sure that glare is not getting in the way. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the menu again by holding menu, and this time we're going to go into function settings. And there's a couple, well, there's a lot of different things you can do when you're setting up your program for your plane. I'm only going to go over a couple of them because I only needed to use a couple of them on my plane, and these are going to be some of the more common mixes that you'll use. Reverse is one. If you ever have a channel that is working opposite that you want it to work, say for instance, when you start off, your throttle has to be up at the top for 0 and 100% at the bottom. You want to switch that because you want 0 to be at the bottom, and so you go into reverse and you can go ahead and change that. Now I know for a fact that on this program we're going to have to change the throttle so that we don't have to do that. So we're just going to click on throttle and use the over keys to get it to go to the other side, and then just hit menu to go out. So I'll just go through the rest of the options real quick. You have your trainer, sub trim. Flaperon is actually one that you might want to consider using. The difference between what I used and the flaperon is that the flaperon will use your flaps with your ailerons. In order to do that, you would need to have flaps on different channels so that it would basically make bigger ailerons. I didn't want to do that because I have a slow flyer and I wanted less control. I didn't want it to be doing tricks up there because I don't want to break it. So I decided not to do flaperons, and I actually did aildiff. That's for your ailerons, and that will allow you to just program your ailerons by themselves. And there's a couple different things. If you have a VTOL plane, instead of an elevator and a rudder, if you just have two elevators at angles, you would use that. And there's just a lot of different programs. So we're going to go back to the beginning, and we already set our reverse. We're not going to use flaperons. And so we're going to go to our ailerons, and we're going to hit menu to go into that. And what you want to do is you want to activate it and then go down, and you can do this by trial and error. That's how I figured it out. But I found out that all of these values need to be at 100. So we're just going to hold left on all these. And there's actually a trick to figure out how to get it to go to the right. You actually use the stick that is connected to whatever you're doing. So if this said rudder, then you would use your rudder stick. But since this says ailerons, we're going to move the aileron stick, and that will help us switch back and forth. So you hold it in that position. Now we can adjust that value. And so now we're going to go down and do the same thing. Hold the stick over and set that value. So now that we have those values set, we're going to hit that. And let's plug in the plane again. The throttle won't go on, so that will be good. Okay. So the plane's on right now, and now we have our ailerons moving back and forth as they should. Let's go into this. I just want to show you guys what would happen if you don't have this set. So let's just take that off real quick. Now let's try to move ailerons. Notice how it only moves that one, and that's the one that's set in our first channel. So as I move the stick to the right, it goes up, stick to the left, it goes down. So what this mix is doing is it's actually mixing our first and our 7th channel. So now I activated it again and hit menu, so it goes back. And now, as you see, if I move the stick, both ailerons move. So that program is to program our ailerons. Now let's keep going. The next thing that I want to do is, if you notice, well, actually you probably can't see that, but as I move up and down, only the back right elevator is moving, and we want those to move in unison. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mix that will mix our first elevator on channel 2 and our second elevator on channel 6. So I'm going to go to Program Mix, and I'm going to hit Mix 1. And okay, I'm going to hit Mix 1. I'm going to activate this. Okay, so what you're going to do is you want the master to be our elevator. So see, it's an aileron. That's our first channel. Second channel is the elevator. Third channel throttle. 4th channel rudder. So that corresponds with what we have our channels set to. So that should make sense. So we're going to set our first one to our elevator because that is the channel that we're wanting to mix. Now our slave, we want that to be whatever channel our second elevator is plugged into. So as you can see, we have it plugged into channel 6, so channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4, channel 5, channel 6. Now this might be confusing. It says flaps right there, that we're mixing it with our flaps, but just remember that we plugged our second elevator into channel 6. The reason we did that is because the 5th channel that I would have originally plugged the elevator into actually wouldn't mix. I don't know, it might be something with the program, but we put it in channel 6, and so flaps are channel 6, so that's where we're going to put it. Now as far as offset, we don't want an offset, and I already figured out what these values need to be, but they just need to be 100, so just scroll down and push right so they go down over there. And then we want this switch to be on, so we'll just go over, and now this switch is on. And the reason we want the switches on is because channel 6 is actually a switch, and so we need to program it so that that switch is turned on, so that when this master tries to get the slave to go, that it will actually respond. So now that we have that set, let's hit OK. And let's back out real quick. Now if we do the elevator, you can see that both elevators are now moving in unison. Okay, now let's see. Let's try the rudder. So the rudder's working. We have our elevators that are working and our ailerons that are working. So the last thing we need to do is to program our flaps. So what we're going to do is our flaps, they are programmed into channel 5. So I'm going to go to auxiliary channel, and I'm going to go to channel 5, and you can go through these different settings. You notice how if I set it to pitch trim, that I can use this knob and it will move them. Now if I go to gear, then it's one of these switches. If I move this switch, you can't see, but it's one of these switches at the top, it will actually flip them back and forth. Now I wanted a little bit more control, so I put pitch trim, and then I'll just move this so you can see. If you move this knob with pitch trim, it will control where those elevators go, or I mean where those flaps go. So now that we have that set, we're gonna hit OK, and we have a programmed plane. Let's just go through it again, make sure everything works right. So let's go through rudder. Rudder's working. Let's go this joystick over here. Ailerons. Ailerons are working. Now let's see. Let's do elevator. Elevator's working. And let's do flaps. Flaps are working. And you're going to have to trust me that the throttle's working. I'm not going to turn that on right now. So that concludes the programming. Thanks.